Hey guys, thanks. I'm impressed by seeing this many people. So much. I appreciate really that you guys stopped by today to check out what I have in stock for you. So let's dive into who I am. If I can get my, there we go. So some of you might already know me, but for those of you who switch your microphone. Is it on?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, there we go. Sorry. So for those of you who doesn't know me already, my name is Søren. I work at Pensia in Copenhagen, Denmark. I'm a developer there doing backend development using Sitecore and the .NET platform. I develop all kinds of different solutions, and I really enjoy working with both technologies, trying to push the limits of what's possible and try and thinking into how we can use it in new ways. As part of my involvement in the community, I've been active over the last 1.5 years, I think. I have a blog that I regularly update with different stuff. I'm also quite active on both Twitter and Slack. So if you have any questions, at the very end, my details are all up. And if you have any questions whatsoever, either regarding this presentation or just questions in general, you're always welcome to reach out and we can have a chat. So let's look at today's agenda and what the key takeaways will be. So I guess most of you have already peeked at the session and been given some sort of general understanding of what we'll be going through today. So, but just to sum up, so over the next 40 minutes, we'll go through generally 2 or 3 things, I would say. So the first thing is that we're going to look at how we can move this way of how you specify a search query from a code-based approach into a more configurable approach using the Sitecore client. Then secondly, we're going to look at how it's possible to personalize our search queries that we configure up. And most importantly, we're going to look at how this is possible using technology you have today from the base libraries of Sitecore, mainly being the content search API, in order to achieve this. So to be a bit more specific, what we're going to look at is a small library that I've been working on over, I started last year, and I've been working on and off on it over the past year or so, named Conjunction. And what Conjunction allows you to do in a nutshell is it actually allows you to go in and modify search queries along with a lot of other different things without the need for doing development and testing and deployment once you have already created the base structure. So like many other things in life, things tend to start with a story, and in this case there isn't an exception to that. So when I created Conjunction, it actually came out from a real-life use case where I was working with a client that actually wanted to have some sort of more configurable approach to working with search queries. So I hope you guys are getting cozy. This room is a bit warm, but so grab some water, some sugar, and allow me to tell you a story about the client who wanted search. So once upon a time, a client came into to our office and said they wanted to have a listing of all their products. Let's for sake say this was a car dealership company, and they wanted to list the different cars they had available in stock. Some of the query we realized that were being constructed needed some sort of statically defined data, and by that I mean, let's say that this car dealership don't want to promote themselves as selling old cars, so maybe they just want to be able to specify we only want to grab the cars for the past year or something like that, because we're only selling new cars to our customers. Secondly, we also realized that some of the queries needed to be able to react dynamically to values being provided during runtime from the user. And by this I mean, let's say that we come in and visit this site where we have a listing of our products, and maybe the user that is visiting the site want to go in and change perhaps say the brand or the color of the cars that is being listed. So we needed to be able to take, let's say, a color that the user picked from the UI, take that in and somehow orchestrate this together with the query during runtime. So if we look at how we're doing things today at a more high level, there are a couple of steps involved. So the first step, which is actually the most important one, is to figure out what should we really query. And as I said, this is the most important thing, because the client comes in and says, yeah, I want to have this listing page. It's going to be completely awesome. We want to list all our cars. You should step back and say, okay, but we need to get all the business requirements in place, because otherwise you might end up revisiting the other steps I'll get back to in a minute a couple of times. So get that correct the first time around. Once we have that in place, we sit down and we create our custom search logic. So this is where we go in and say, okay, we have this requirement, we're going to translate it into, let's say we search for color, we go in and code up our logic saying, okay, we can provide some sort of way that the user can go in and specify the color and construct the search query as it goes by. Then last but not least, we're going to present those results to the user. So as for the last bit, that's not so important for this talk, but that's just to give the complete picture. So for a moment, and before we get ahead of ourselves, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same step in terms of step 2. So just to give a quick 101 on how it looks today when you're doing a search query, there are 3 things involved in terms of getting search results back. So the first step is that, okay, you go in and specify what search index do you want to work on. This could be, for instance, Sitecore's master index. It could also be your own index you have created. Once you have that, you go in and say, now I want to open up a connection to that search index. You create a context. This is kind of like, for those of you who may or may not have used this API, like using the entity framework and getting context to the database you can work on kind of thing. So once you have that, the last bit is that you go in and say, now I want to execute a set of search queries against this search index, and you can get results back. If we look at how this code looks, it's very clean, right? Not a lot of code is actually required. 5 lines of code or so in order to go in and say, I want to query this index, open up a connection, retrieve some results, whereas some content that is on our search results contains some specific text. But this is a really simple example, and if we were to translate it into something that would be a bit more useful, and probably what we usually see when we build up our own logic built around a client's business, this grows in size. So we start off by saying we use the predicate builder that's just with Sitecore itself, which allows us to construct these sort of logically grouped queries together, nest them deeply. There are a lot of different options we can use. In this case, we are saying, okay, we only want to start off by taking things that was created over the past years. Like I said, this car dealership only wants to present new cars. Then secondly, let's also say that they could provide some search term, and it would be like the name of the car. Then you can also go in and say, I also want to include things that is either within the date or perhaps is also the specified name. Then you might go in and say, okay, I construct a search query. You may be applying some sorting, some paging, and finally getting the results back. So my point here being that this is a really simple example, and as time goes by and the client actually presents more and more requirements, this code will grow in size, and you don't want to end up in a situation where it's just one single method, so you're going to split it out, and eventually you will end up with a lot of different business logic implementations for constructing the search queries. Right. So we implemented everything as usual, right? And deliver on time, obviously. So, and then we have the client at this stage where he says, oh, I got this idea, that if we could just tweak this bit and, you know, do this. And then the developer on the other hand goes, oh, crap, now changes are incoming, because they know what's being involved in this process. So, as I said, the client suddenly realizes they want to tweak which field are being used. So let's say that we index a couple of fields, we're using some sort of initial idea of what we're querying in the search index. Maybe they want to change that. Maybe they also want to go in and personalize whatever's being shown to them based on some sort of visitor pattern. That's for for sake say that they have two sorts of user groups, like budget buyers and premium buyers. Maybe they want to present different results to boost up their sale. And in terms of seeing how a sale can be boosted, maybe they also want to apply some sort of A/B testing to see, okay, if I adjust my query, apply it for like a month, will it yield better sale result? And essentially all the other little things that the client can come up with. And usually you see a developer side goes twitching just a bit because they know it's not little things, right? So the problem that comes along with the current approach is, as I said, the query just exists in code. And this gives some challenges because, first of all, you need to have a developer involved in making the changes. Once those changes are in place, we're doing some testing. We are doing some testing as developers. The client may be doing some testing, maybe not in a complete fashion. And at the very end, we're going to ship it. And what could possibly go wrong with shipping code, right? So, yeah. But what it means in practice for the client is that the time to market for them in order to get something kicked out of the door is slowed down quite a bit, actually. And it could lead to a situation where the competitor actually gets all the traction instead of they're getting it. And the cost actually is also, I mean, even a small change, and all these steps needs to be, completed. Developer, testing, deployment. So a lot of things go into a single change. And last, I think it's also quite difficult to personalize and test these search queries at the moment, because there's no way you can go and swap things in and out while it's still a code-based approach. By the time you get to this point and you have luck explaining to a client, this is the situation we're in, this is the reaction you usually get. So not the most happy client at this point, okay? And we want to avoid this. So I took some steps towards trying to solve this issue of having an angry client, and thought about how we can change the way we're working with the search queries. So in able to help our client, there are a couple of things we need to accommodate. So the first thing, as I mentioned, is moving this configuration-based approach from code into a Sitecore client configuration. Then secondly, we also need to be able to vary search queries based on personalization. While doing so, we also need to make sure that we utilize as much as standard functionality that ships with Sitecore, so we don't have to relearn a whole new thing while using this extra set of functionality. So if you look more into details at step 1, as I said, we need to move the code configuration into a configuration from Sitecore. What that means is that when we do something like that, we need to accommodate the fact that we can actually go in and create these nested search structures using the predicate builder. So we want to mimic that in a way that we can configure complex queries. And we also need to some way go in and allow the configuration to be able to react to values that is provided either during runtime dynamically by a user, but also using preset values like a date span, for instance. As far as personalizing search queries, I wanted to start out with the most simple case, that you could vary a search configuration being a data source item on a rendering that could list out results from search using personalization, as you know today. And the example, as I said, could be differentiating between users that would only go in to buy budget cars, but also premium users that could buy more expensive cars. So if we are looking at how this can be conceptualized, I sat down and tried to draw some very simple drawings on how I would see it. So I'm just going to walk you through it so you can see my mental picture of how I view things separate from the code. So at the very bottom to the left-hand side, we have what I would say like a power user. I wouldn't necessarily call this your average content editor, because you do have to know some sort of way of thinking about search query construction. But let's say a power user at the client or a developer that's assisting on a consultant basis We want to go in and be able to help configuring search queries in an easy way. For the user at the top that is visiting the site, they want to be presented with search results that is relevant to them, and they want to also be able to tweak the results they're seeing. As I mentioned, can provide color as a part of the filtering. And last but not least, we have the search index, which is the guy that we're pulling data from. So all these things were something I wanted to tangle together using some sort of engine kind of thing, which is the whole start of conjunction, actually. So just to get back to the thing I mentioned about orchestrating more complex hierarchies that would mimic the predicate builder logic, I sat down and said, okay, I gotta have some conceptual terms I can work with. So at the very top, with the crown on the head, you have what's called the root of a search query. And this is the guy that is like the most intro point of a search query. And this contains some logic in terms of, what would I say, the model that is being fetched from the search index. It also contains some sort of logical operator in terms of what I would say you could say a grouping have. So a grouping is simply like just a collection of a rule, and I will get back to what a rule is in a minute. But a grouping is just whether something should be logically AND together or together. Then we have the rule as the last concept. And a rule is basically the guy that says, I want to fetch something from my search index by this field that should be compared in some way, like equality or containing or wildcard, to some specific value. That being either dynamically given to me, or I can fetch it as a preset value. So at this moment, I think I'm gonna shift towards what it is I actually ended up with. So as I said, the name of the beast is conjunction, and what conjunction is in a nutshell, it's a utility made for Sitecore, which actually enables a lot of these things we already talked about. So you have the the configuration by where you remove the code changes. You can specify these complex object or query structures. You can also react to dynamic values or preset values. And it also makes it possible to vary search queries based on personalization. The last piece I also wrote is that it enables extensibility. And for me as a developer, this was something that I value quite a deal, because when I wrote this, it was my intention that I would at some point provide this back to the community, and I wanted to make it as extensible and flexible as possible, so there isn't any constraints that you are not allowed to do anything inside the internals of the library. There are a lot of different extension points you can work on and provide a lot of your own components to this thing. So out of the box, conjunction ships with two things actually. So it ships with a Sitecore module. It's a package you install that includes the base templates you need, along with some setting items, so you can actually start ahead and get your head around creating the search queries. And then it includes a .NET library that you can find as a NuGet package, and this contains all the core logic you can use in your own application. And I want to be a bit specific here, because I was given a lot of questions when I initially started working with this, whether or not it was a complete search framework, it was a subset of something that you needed to relearn a lot of things. And in fact, conjunction is not a complete search experience. You can think of it as a set of building blocks where you can create your own search experience that is tailored towards the client solution you're working on. So you don't get any fancy plug and play things where you can do type ahead and stuff. It's building blocks that is supposed to make life easier for you when you work as a developer. So if we look at the layers, just to emphasize a bit, at the bottom we have the content search API as you know it today. Sitting on top of that, we have the conjunction library, which contains all the core functionality. And at the very top, you have your own search experience, which would be individually configured based on your client solution. And there's a couple of things you can hook into. Like you can create custom. I just wrote some keyword buzzwords I would say up on the board now, but we'll get back to it. But there's a lot of things you can actually create which is specific to your solution. If we zoom down a bit into the actors involved, just to give you some picture on what's going on at the lower level. Starting from the bottom, we work with the concept of three different providers. So you have something called an element provider, and basically an element provider is just something that is able to suck in some data, transform it into an internal model of configuration that Conjunction can work with. And out of the box, Conjunction ships with a Sitecore item configuration element provider. So that's all set for you. But let's say you wanted to have your own sort of provider for passing in search element configuration. You could totally do that. Same goes for the value provider. This is the guy that provides values that is being resolved during runtime. So again, the code is being passed in. Some way you want to take this value, stuff it into a query during runtime. This is the responsibility of the value provider. And out of the box, you can get, there is a name value sort of provider where you can pass in a query string. So because that was the most basic use case I had to work with in the beginning, that user comes in, pass in some query string, they wanted to take that, resolve that during runtime. So that's also built in to begin with. Then the last bit is the index name provider. And this is just a provider that tells which search index you want to look up in. And by default, Conjunction ships with a Sitecore web or master index name provider that will just go in and look at the context you're in and choose the right search index. But I should say that you should always try and create your search index following this domain kind of thing, where if you're working with products, create an index for products, cars, likewise, and stuff. So keep that in mind. And you can create your own providers as well. So summing up, these three guys are being used inside the search result repository. And this is the main entry point for receiving the search results. As I said in a few slides back, this sits right on top on the Content Search API as it is today. So you can actually go in and say, okay, everything you can do with that today, you can actually do with Conjunction as well. So let's say you wanted to use Solar, you can do that. You just use the default Solar configuration that ships with Cycle. You all said you see the same thing. And Azure, for instance, could be also a case you want to do. So at the end of the day, this guy is just responsible for returning the research results that is at the top level, these indexable entity models. And this is just a domain model for your search results. Think of it like a search result item class that ships with Cycle now. So it's kind of the same thing. Right. So let's see how you would actually go in and configure a small configuration and apply some of the principles we've talked about. I'm just gonna see if I can go back to, there we go. Right. So I've created a very small solution. Cycle probably needs to load. So let's start off by doing that. Oh, yes, it does. So basically, I tried to create a small sample page where you can see how the most basic things are working. Again, we're following this idea of having a client who is just having a listing of cars. So what I created, I just created a small folder with some cars in it. So we have some budget cars, Fippy cars, and we also have some premium cars, which includes the Power Bus and Thunder Ride. Then we have a demo page, which I think I'll just show you. So the demo page, I'm just showing it in preview mode, it's just for the sake of easiness here. So this page here, if we load this guy, it will go in and fit some search result. And as you can see, it found 2 results, Amphibicar version 1 and 2. All right, so how does this work? If we look at this guy here, oh, I just need to find the right tab. So this page contains a rendering, a controller rendering. And essentially, this controller rendering contains a data source to a path named conjunction search queries cars budget cars. So right now we're feeding in this controller with a pre-configured search configuration. And if we look at how the search configuration look, we actually have it down here, cars, budget cars. So let's see if I can scroll down a bit. Yeah, here we go. So as I said, this is the root item, the king of the top. The first thing you configure is which model should it return, and statically or strongly type it together with in your code. Secondly, down here at the bottom, we have how the rules or groupings underneath the root should be grouped to, or logically grouped together, and we're just saying it should be ANDed together. So, and if we expand this, we can see there are two rules down here. So the first one I want to start off with is a rule named isBudget, and isBudget contains a few different things. So starting from the top, we have an associated property name, and this is the name of the property on our entity model we want to look up data in. Then we specify how we want to compare it, and then we have the option of saying either do we want to use a dynamically provided value, or do we want to use default value? And in this case, we're saying we want to use the default value because we want to say if a car is less priced than 5,000 something, this is a budget car. But we also had the option of saying we want to go in and allow filtering based on the color. So again, we say, if we scroll up just a bit, we specify that we want to look up in the color name. We want to say it should be equal. Then we specify down here some value that will provide us with the dynamic value during runtime. And this can be anything. I just adopted my own convention of saying dollar or something, so it's a bit more, I can keep track of what's a conjunction variable and what's not. But this could actually be anything. And you can actually go in and create this item in a different language. So if your client were using French and an English side and they wanted to have the variables changing, they could do that as well. So if we go back to this guy, we can go in and say, all right, maybe we also want to include the color that should be blue. And now we only get the result of the blue car. Let me just to show I'm not cheating or anything. So these two cars we have in here, the first version is black, second version is blue, and we get the second version back. I also mentioned that you could go in and create personalization. So let's have a look at that. Because what I also did was create a different configuration in premium cars. And of course it should be expensive, it's premium, right? So we say now the price should be greater than or equal to 5,000. But we also say, okay, maybe there is some idea that a fancy, expensive car should be black. So we also want to include that. So this is the second configuration we have. So if we go back up to our demo page, go back into the details and final rendering, edit this guy, have our rendering, and we can personalize this. So let's say that right now I don't have that exact rule for this, but let's say you created your own custom rule where you could specify whether or not a customer were a premium customer at this car dealership. Then you would go in as you normally do, edit a rule, find the rule you're looking for, and apply that. Let's just to get some results back, I'm just gonna, nope, that was not the one. I'm just gonna take the where it's always true, if I can get it listed. There we have it. There we go. And of course the dialogue isn't. There we go. Thanks, man. We apply that. We OK to this. OK to, whoop. Wonder if it came on. Nice. Yeah, of course it did. Sorry about that. While going over this again. So essentially, what you can do is that you can apply everything that you would normally do, and is what editors are used to doing. So there isn't any teaching of the editors in this. This is just something that they would be completely used to if they are used to working with personalization, and it should be very familiar to them. So let's save this. I think I got it right now. So I'm just going to remove the color just for the sake of it, refresh it, and now we get the font right back, which is the only car that is priced above that money. I intentionally created 2 cars, so the only one would be showing up would be the one that was priced. Oh no, that's actually not true. It's the one that is black. The bus is a different color. So yeah, okay. So just to show you how it's just, you can go in, right-click a route, you can insert a grouping or rule, and you can just keep on adding up, and you can build these complex queries yourself. So you're right. So that's how the basics of it is actually working. So let me just get back to the demo. Not to the demo, to the slides that is. Let's see if I can get it rolling again. There we go. Right. So at this moment, you've seen a couple of the default features that ships with the first version that was initially released at the start of this year. But I've also been planning ahead of what's the next things that will probably come in. So obviously, there's a lot of easy wins to get, like paging and sorting, facets. Those are some of the things you can expect coming out very soon. Most of the code has been done, so it's just a matter of testing it and pushing it out. Then there's also the subject of boosting. And I've had some interesting conversations with other people in the community about how you can go in and perhaps boost the different parts of the search query based on personalization as well. So I hope that I'll be able to gather all my notes soon and share with you what we've been talking about in a blog post. The next thing that's also been a discussion topic is the way that you configure these search elements or configurations, because as you can see, you would go in, create them as items, kind of like from other things in Sitecore, and that clearly has its advantages. But if you're a more visually aided person, maybe you want to go in and configure it using GUID in some sense. So what we've been looking at is whether or not you can utilize the rules engine and the user interface for that, and that's also something that I will be explaining a bit more about when we get to that point. So it's in the finalizing stages. We just couldn't have it ready for you today so we could show it. Another thing that I also want to mention, and this is also something that is highly prioritized, is the way that you can test and preview results. So right now, if you change the search query in code, the only way you can see the change is actually building the system, deploying it, having the right set of items, and test it and stuff like that. What I want to be able to enable other users to do is actually have a page at the root level where you can go in and say, I want to test how my search result would look, both without any changes to, let's say, these dynamically provided values, but also with them. So let's say that I could go in and say, list me all the cars available, but also list me all the cars that is available based on the premise of only filtering using a specific color. So that's also something you can expect coming out soon. Because for me, that was something that would be really great to enable that feature. Last but not least, this is just something that is very alpha stage thoughts at this moment. But I mentioned at the beginning that that I would enable changes to the search configuration without any code change. That is also mostly true. The only thing that isn't true is that if your search index changes a lot of fields coming in, a lot of fields being removed, then your model that you define, this indexable model you have, it is also something that needs to be changed. And that is cool in a sense that you get the static typing in your code, but maybe you also want to have a more dynamic approach to how you configure these search queries or the entities. But again, it's alpha stage. If it's something that sounds interesting in any way, reach out and we can have a chat about it. So at this moment, you might be thinking, okay, I want to get started, but how do I get started? So the first thing I would advise you to do is obviously while I'm here, grab a hold of me, we can have a chat. The second thing would be go in and have a look at the documentation. I will tweet the link to the documentation afterwards under the SUGCON channel. So if you don't get a photo snap of it now, it will be posted. The second thing is that I really advise you to ask questions. So at this moment, there's a Slack channel, #conjunction, where you can go in and ask all the questions you want. I'll try and answer them as quickly as I can, and when I do have the time for it. But there's also, you can also reach out to Twitter. But the main point here is that just reach out. Really, I mean, that's my point. And in case I forgot to mention, so like a lot of other great products also available out in the landscape, Conjunction is actually MIT licensed, which means that it's completely open source, completely free of charge. You can take it in any way you want and use it in any project you want, and it's up to you guys how you want to use it. For me, it was a matter of, I mean, I use a lot of cool stuff from the community, and this is my contribute back to the community. So I hope that you'll enjoy it in some sense. And if you're looking at helping with making Conjunction better, there's also a couple of things you can do. So first of all, you can give it a spin on a hobby project. If you're really bold, you can try to convince your project managers that you want to use it in a real life project. You can pitch ideas, suggest things. I'm very open to ideas on how we can improve stuff. While going over the documentation, if there's anything that's unclear or you think can be done better, please reach out, or even better, change it yourself, do a pull request and let me review it. And if you're looking into becoming a more, committed contributor in some sense, there's also the possibility of doing that. There's already a couple of guys in the community who's engaged in this project. So if you're looking into if you find this cool and you want to help out, also reach out and we can have a chat about it. So before we completely get to the end, there was just one thing I wanted to show you, and I'm just going to show the last slide, and then I want to go quickly back to the code just to show you the code, because I realized I forgot that, just so you can see how easy it is actually. So yeah, keep this in mind. We'll get back to this, because the code is actually something I just want to quickly show you. It's very simple. So this controller rendering we had, it's just so you can see how you would bootstrap and use Conjunction. So the controller itself contains a field to something called a search result repository, an interface. And you specify the type that you want to return from the search index. So in order to create the search index, there is a lot of things that make it simple. So as I said to begin with, the first thing you do is you specify how you want to provide, how you get the elements. And in this case, we use the default Sitecore element provider, where we pass in the item that contains the search configuration. So in this case, it's the data source item that contains the search configuration. Secondly, we define how we get values back that is provided during runtime. And as I said, we have a name value pair, value provider, where we just pass in the query string on the request, so we can use that during runtime. So that allowed me to pass in the $color, and this guy will pick it up and stuff it into the search query. Then the last piece is that there is a builder that is included that is actually the last guy that is orchestrating all the internals of Conjunction. And you can pass in an optional index name provider. I only included it in code just for the sake of completeness. It's not needed, but you can provide your own search name provider. And then you just choose build or create with the configuration, and you're actually all set. This is what's needed. for code, I mean, compared to your logic growing in size using the default approach with the content search API. And then you can simply just go in and say, I want to fetch search results using the search criteria. The search criteria is the guide that would contain the paging and sorting and stuff like that. And then you guys get results back where you can get the total number of hits and the actual hits that is using the type defined on the search result repository. And you can work with that. So just to wrap up, again, thanks for the sponsors. Without you guys, we wouldn't be here. And more importantly, thanks to you guys for being here, and thanks for showing up to my presentation. I hope it's been giving you some ideas on what you can use conjunction for, and inspired you to maybe participate in the development of conjunction. If you have any questions whatsoever, please reach out. I will be here for the rest of the convention, obviously, but you can also reach me out on Slack, Twitter, and also you can follow me along my blog for more information about the development of conjunction. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Robert. We have a few minutes, so I think we can answer one or two questions if you are.
In your example, the code is getting the results directly.
Yeah.
If you have a search interface that is client-side that needs to send the query back to the backend, is there a possibility to get the link expression or the predicate instead of directly the results in the backend?
Right now there isn't, but it could probably be extended to be that way. Behind the scenes, the search configuration is actually being sucked in, and there's this concept of a processor that actually traverses the entire tree, and then it outputs some sort of result. So let's say that you wanted to go in, process a configuration, deliver that out using JSON, for instance. You could do that. Definitely. There's an extension point for that.
So hand over here. That's one.
Right now, Sitecore and Azure Search don't support complex link queries. So there's your module supported within Azure Search.
As I said, if it's supported by API, it's supported in conjunction. Every configuration you can do with the Content Search API is directly applicable in using conjunction as well. Think of it just as a set of extra building blocks on top of Content Search API. So if you can do it using that, you can do it using conjunction as well.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
All right, so thank you. I'm sure we'll be here for the rest of the conference. So if you have any questions still, then don't hesitate to contact him. I think we have a quick break. Yeah, we have another switch, and then we'll be in 10 minutes back in the new room. Thank you. Thanks.
All right.
Did great.
Thanks, man.
Very natural the way you stood there, and yeah, also great introduction to the module.
Cool. Thanks.
Interesting. I was thinking, have you also considered like doing more complex queries, like for example lifting up the operator, for example the root query, then you have like more conditions, so you can build a deeper hierarchy.
Definitely. So that's the thing. You can just shut this off. So you can go in. A grouping can contain another grouping, which is the case you have here. So you have the root, which contains a grouping. Essentially, these two could just be one, because this is also containing the logical grouping logic. But this is definitely something that's right out of the box. You can do this, because that was one of the things I wanted to achieve. So it wouldn't limit the user in any way of building these nested structures.
So this is possible.
It is possible, yes.
Great. Thanks.
Excellent. Great talk. Very good. I was talking to Kieran, who sits next to me, and we were looking at conjunction the other day. And he went, remember that thing that we wrote which takes a rule and turns it into a search query. And we were like, did we ever document that ever? And we were like, I don't think we did. So there is a feature in Sitecore that takes queries and you build it in the rules engine and it will turn that into a search query. So
that's pretty cool, actually.
But I can't find any information about it. And it's now been a while since we wrote it, but it is in there and I'm sure for what you're doing.
For the next one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but it just kind of, it is. Because I remember doing it and we wrote a blog post about it, but I can't find that blog post anymore. And it's kind of in the migration of something somewhere. So we were trying to find it because Kieran was like, I spent ages writing that. And it allows you to build it up with the rules. And it just, doing those ands and ors and other things is just part of the rules thing. So there is something that can process that. Now, it's probably not as flexible, and it's interesting with how you would feed in like different values and other things into it,
but it would be nice to see something, and then I could see if I could incorporate the same ideas or maybe a couple of things together or something.
I need to look around for it, but I thought
it is in there somewhere.
It's in there. It's crazy because you're like, well, you wrote it, Stephen. You should know where it is, and I'm like, yeah, well, that's cool. I wrote it, but we remember writing it. Yeah, I know. We wrote it as a blog post, and we put it somewhere. You know, when you kind of go, there's all the information in my head. I'm going to put it there, and now I can forget about it. But I think when they moved to the new Sitecore blog thing, it kind of got lost. So we're going to try and
we can find it on a cached Google.
But there must be like a rule processor or something that can read and then turn into the search index. But if I find it, or if you find it first, I'll let you know. It just rang a bell the other day when we were looking at it because Kieran went, I'm sure I wrote something that turned a rule into a thing, but I really like all the different providers and other things like that. The only thing I was going to ask is what does the index name provider do? Because there is a feature in search to give it an item and it will tell you what index it's in.
Yeah, it's actually it's just by default it's just an interface that's just providing it's just one method where you get the name out, so you can implement it in any way you want. It was just to have some sort of, because I wanted to have some convention about the fact that I want to help people. Exactly, I want to help people splitting up the indexes into small parts, so it isn't. It's not all ending up in the master index, which tends sometimes to be the case.
Yeah.
So.
But it's already there, so it's easy.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's true. No, that was really good. Like I said, it just got me. It's a shame that we haven't.
I've actually used it in one project.
Yeah.
We used the model to build some of our own stuff, which does the same thing. I'm that's still short. I actually think I'll see if I can find where in the code it is as well.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, because I'm sure as well.
Must be
it's good. I looked at it before, so I've seen it. A couple of things. How difficult would it be to put in a different query resolver than content search? Because there are things content search can't do. How tightly bound to content search is it?
Not that tightly, actually. I think so. You have so there's the guy that builds up. So essentially, it's only the repository class that is tightly together with the content search API. So
we just do another repository model.
Yeah, so it's just an interface you can implement yourself, which contains all the different things.
Because for large-scale solutions, we use Solar features
that are not.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I hate that. But that's how it is.
No, exactly. It was a decision at the time, and I'm like, I wish that you could get the SolarNet object out of it easier.
So
I'm sure you can.
Yeah, you can. Exactly. The two things. The
Martin.
I know. I actually had them. We did one project where we used Tim and Martin as consultants, and they did some trickies in it to get it out a bit easier. So we have it, but that's it's only it's not made for anything else but the project. It's the prefixing of the underscore content for every query. You lose every ranking in
okay.
all of the advanced Solar handlers.
actually specify which fields in the solver, not a specific field. And then of course, the grouping. Yeah, that double detection for the product variants and all those things. Those are the two main things that you kind of miss.
Yeah, I miss not like in Sitecore now. If you work on something, the team keeps it. So where we did publishing and we keep it. Whereas we lost. It's really weird. We lost search. It just kind of. we need to. There's more stuff.
Yeah,
exactly. You know, and it kind of went away. And so I miss.
Yeah,
the
that's
search
why
stuff.
there's not enough development on the content search. There are other areas where it's more. So that's actually the reason.
Interesting the question you had about the Azure search, because Azure search just doesn't stand up like Microsoft wise. Like when people are trying to get Azure search to work, and it's just missing so many things, and they've raised it all with Microsoft and said, "Come on, guys!"
Especially on the analytics.
Yeah, it's missing so much stuff.
So I would actually be interested in joining you on it and rewriting it. I have a few things that I think could be interesting that would be really usable for us, because we tend on a lot of the products because we need, or maybe it's not a 100% need, but also a, hey, now we know that we in the future will not. We rarely use content search because you get limitations.
Yeah.
But if you build on something like this and have a different repository and just can factor in whatever you want to use. So for simple projects, hey, just go content search, no worries. Just switch out the repository on your IOC. Yeah. And you're done.
Exactly.
I think it's an interesting need that I guess we never thought of. Is more that, like you say, it's baked into your code. So your changes to your search have to be distributed with the DLLs. And I guess there's always been a couple of things with content search that people either think of it as a page search, which is incorrect because it's indexing your content, not the pages. And also, it's like the predefined query things, which I think is a good solution for it.
And my first was also why the items, because it keeps growing so tremendous. But the rules editor is, from my point of view, but there's a dislike. Some content users like the rule editors or something.
But I think sometimes but I think if, like that lady came up with her or and and diagrams,
exactly.
I think sometimes the rules engine just handles that for you. That just the dialogue itself. I mean, so
you have something for